how could money move effectively through the banking system and connect that with the registration of the title as well.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So welcome to another edition of our podcast, Sense of Identity. And for those of you that have listened to this before, you'll know that we like to try and talk to others that are doing really, really interesting stuff. Obviously, if it's techie, fantastic. And particularly where there's a slant on risk. And I've got to say, I think this is a really interesting one in terms of solving some of that. So most importantly, welcome to Angela Hesketh from PEXA. As the head of market development. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Great to be here. Delighted to take part.
No, it's fantastic. I really appreciate your time. And ironically, on the way into this, I'm going to fess up to it, everybody. We got caught in one of those classic Microsoft updates. So Angela's been extraordinarily patient. Particularly since I understand you've just returned from Australia, so you might be suffering about your voice. So apologies, you've had a bad start to the day, but yeah, hopefully you're okay.
Not usually this croaky, but yes, absolutely. Any point in time that's given back to me at the moment is very welcome.
So if I may, and I'm the ignoramus in the room for this, but when we started chatting about what you do, and what PEXA does and has done to sort of change the dynamics of a market that's so close to us all, it just felt really important to a degree to make sure people understood what it was. So if I can set a little bit of the scene, and then really this is about understanding PEXA, what it does, and that stuff. But just my summary point. From what I understand, in the Australian market, PEXA have been, I guess the word is extraordinarily dominant in changing the way that the home purchase market, remortgage market, anything to do with that sort of financial aspect of our lives in Australia particularly, and how it's de-risked and the whole process of someone buying a home or remortgaging out there, because in the UK we all know how problematic that can be. When you started chatting about what PEXA have done out in Australia, and the numbers I think were extraordinary, 90% of transactions. So I'm almost going to try and stop there and just interject with questions. But would you mind just perhaps giving our listeners a feel for what it is PEXA does and has done so extraordinarily well?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so PEXA stands for Property Exchange Australia, firstly, and it came about to look at what was a largely defective system in Australia in relation to home buying, selling, and remortgage. A familiar discussion that we have here, I have to say.
Yeah.
And they did quite a stark thing, really, and quite an ambitious thing over there. So they had a paper settlement procedure over there, which was very much how it was when I first started in conveyancing. So in Australia, they were meeting at each other's offices and passing over the title deeds and taking in the checks physically on the moving day. And the same for refinance. And what they looked to do, they wanted to move to electronic conveyancing. That was the aim, that was the ambition, and that was something that the land registries over in Australia wanted to do, the lenders wanted to do, and to a certain extent the rest of the community. It was a matter of this has got some serious challenges. So they moved from that very physical paper settlement to electronic conveyancing, and in the middle of that, PEXA became a thing. So this was about how could we, rather than dealing with the old-fashioned checks and all the rest of it, how could money move effectively through the banking system and connect that with the registration of the title as well. So remove all of the risks of money being lost, money being allocated in the wrong place, but also the security of the title itself and making sure that title passed effectively and efficiently. Pretty much the same time as the money was moving across. So how could they coordinate the two?
Totally. And for anybody, I mean, you don't have to be in financial services to experience the UK, I would say lack of process. I mean, it really is extraordinarily frictionful. And for me, what I thought was fascinating was this affects everybody, not, the consumers, the intermediary, the legal parties, the banks. I mean, there's so many vested interests in trying to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And it's actually happened to a large extent in Australia, and not yet in the UK. And that for me, I thought, well, this is crazy. That for me was just amazing.
Absolutely. So we've been on a different journey, but there's so many things that are so key to this. So we've had, as I say, when I first went into property work and conveyancing, we were doing that physical settlement. But the difference was we've had this 25-year period or thereabouts where we have moved away from physical settlement, but we didn't have true electronic conveyancing and we didn't have a PEXA solution. So we've sort of had to navigate and map through that by developing different processes, different procedures, different applications, all sorts of different things. So it's a bit like a spaghetti junction of different processes that we do.
Yeah.
And everything is separated and dependent on everyone doing the right thing at the right time, which, we know it's quite amazing actually that it does happen at all at times, but you can see how this has led to this extension of time. We've gone from a transaction that used to take 6 to 8 weeks up to 4, 5, 6 months quite often now.
And you're contending, I guess, as well. And the other thing people probably do or may not appreciate, but you're contending with geography. I mean, which is, I think the UK is 31 times smaller than Australia as a physical mass, and you've got time zones and God knows what else to contend with. So aside from just the sheer process of it, you've got all these other aspects to consider too.
Yeah, I mean, we can always draw on the things that are different, but the reality of it is, in Australia they had 8 different jurisdictions, 8 different land registries, and 8 different sets of processes to deal with. In the UK, we've got one of each we've got one registry in England and Wales that deals with all of the property within that aspect. We've got a number of different regulators, but they're all in looking at similar things at the moment. And I just think the opportunity here for us to simplify and de-risk and provide that process that actually takes so much of this angst and loss and all of those things out of it. I mean, today there's around a 30% dropout in England and Wales. That's wow. Huge. The amount of loss around that is massive. The indemnity insurance for those that act within conveyancing and home property moving and selling is the highest insurance that you can get, other than if you insure racehorses. Right. It's literally the second one down. It's a very unpleasant process for everyone involved, without exception. And
it's a really weird one, because also I think people in the UK, and I was going to ask you a question whether Australia is the same. I mean, there's that phrase, your home is your castle, or some words to that effect. We have a real affinity in the UK for property, don't we, in our homes, and striving to be able to buy a home, which unfortunately is becoming increasingly again problematic. But the buy to let market is obviously involved. It doesn't really matter what area you're in. Remortgage, I'm actually rhetorically asking this. I'm assuming it doesn't make any difference whether it's remortgage, new home purchase, buy to let. Everything involves the same issues and same challenges. Does it? Very,
very similar processes. I mean, the only thing that is different when you look at remortgage and refinance is there tends to be less parties involved, and sometimes, dependent on the reason you're remortgaging, it's less time dependent perhaps than if you're trying to move house and trying to coordinate all of those things. But the same issues arise where there is a lack of visibility, there's a lack of certainty, you're not able to provide any reassurance other than you're in the process and we will keep you informed as much as we can, but we can't tell you when you're going to be out the other end. And actually when money is flowing in the system, because again, I think one of the things that people tend to say as well, one of the big differences between Australia and the UK is we don't have chains in Australia. They do have chains in Australia. Most people will buy and sell on the same date. They'll move home on the same date because they've got no other option. There isn't an option to go anywhere or break chains and things like that. So it's very similar. But the challenge is you can't, in the UK, you can't give any certainty of when money is going to move across. You put it into the banking system, and at some point it pops out somewhere else, and then you have to pass it along, and that's how that works. In the PEXA system, you can say the time of day it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and you can see it happen. And not only that, you're also able to automate the lodgement with Land Registry of those title documents, so that you've also got the assurance that the title is going to be registered ultimately as well. So from a lender and consumer perspective, they're protected there. None of those things exist today. They're all dependent on very physical processes about, where's the money? Can you tell me where's the money? There's lots of chasing, there's lots of emails, there's lots of phone calls, there's lots of stress around those key parts of the procedure, and at a time when you've already been through a 4 or 5 months process where you felt as if you were a bit out of control.
I think home buying and everything to do with it is listed up there amongst the most stressful things in your life, probably having a baby and families and stuff. But
again, divorce is the only one that's seen as higher.
Really?
So, and let's be honest, in a lot of these transactions, you're doing both.
Oh my God.
This happens, doesn't it? You're going to be getting divorced, you're going to be moving house. So it is authoritatively one of the
worst.
Things.
So in terms of the journey, because trying to move through the treacle of changing a system like the one we've all grown to, I was going to say hate in the UK, because I can't imagine anyone likes what's going on here, anybody. So where it's not easy, and of course I can't imagine it's easy. At least you've got that massive experience and the technical solution to enable you to engineer the right outcomes for the UK. But where on the journey are we? Because for me, this feels like, well, this is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't anybody want this in play across the board? There's no one loses at all. But it's like most things, it's always frustrating to see the pace of this. So, where are you on your journey in that context?
Yeah, so in relation to PEXA in the UK, we've been active in the remortgage market for a couple of years now. So we've done over £150 million in transaction value within remortgage at this stage. And the reason that we started within remortgage is because there is less stakeholders, and, it allows us to prove the concept and all the rest of it. We are moving into sale and purchase we're launching officially in September. We have done our first pilot purchase through there.
So we've happening now.
So amazing. It's happening, yeah. So there's a number of roadshows happening in September around trying to really uplift the amount of information and data out there for people, so that particularly in the conveyancing community they know, but also lenders and other stakeholders, just to get that awareness where we need it to be. And there's lots of challenges with this. It is a re-education. We are peeling back the layers, and some things will need to change in relation to process. A lot of people have legacy systems as well. So there's a lot to work through with that. But there's a high level of understanding within PEXA as to the size of the challenge, is what I'm going to say, but also the benefits that can be gained as a result. So it's not something that's going to be a sort of a very stark overnight, right? It was the non-PEXA. Yeah, exactly. And the types of transactions that you'll be able to transact in PEXA and the number of lenders that will be transacting will just evolve over time, really. But it's really sort of getting everybody ready for that and addressing and talking to all of the regulators. We're in regular contact with the regulators, with UK Finance, with all the different parts of the puzzle to sort of say, right, okay, let's talk about the challenge, and let's talk about what needs to change to facilitate that.
Absolutely, because like you say, the breadth of stakeholders here is in itself probably part of the challenge. Apart from trying to do things the way that the legal market or the mortgage broker market, the lender market might work, and like you say, the regulators and things. But I sort of rapidly making notes here, because when we talked about this originally, apart from the stress factor, which by the way I hadn't even put on my list, but is 100% there, isn't it? This is about convenience, pace, efficiency, risk. I'm struggling to see where there's a downside, but change is not easy, is it? So
it's not, and it's bringing an industry along along with you, isn't it? So again, one of the things that tends to be talked about in the Australian journey is this was a real ambition for a lot of the regulators and registries and all the rest of it. And there's a suggestion often that it was because it was mandated that it happened. The reality of it is it had to be proven before it, and each individual state have taken it on at a different time. So everyone's had to do dual processing over there. That's something that's had to happen, which is exactly what we'll have over here as well. But even during that time, they've seen the benefit of it. Yeah. And at different stages, each state has decided whether they're going to mandate or not. The most one of the most recent ones is Queensland, but they had to have 80% of people transacting on that platform before they would go to mandation. So you've still had to do an awful lot of work with people to show that benefit before that can happen.
Yeah,
and in the UK, there's a real sort of concern around mandation generally. So I don't see that that's the route that we're going to go along here. But we understand that, and therefore it's a matter of how you do show that value and bring those people along with you. So, but that is incredibly challenging within the number of stakeholders. But you've got to face into it, haven't you, and say this is not a system that is working at the moment. It's not a system that anyone through choice, in my opinion, would say, oh yeah, this is the way we're going to move property, we're going to buy and sell, we're going to refinance. Who would say that in reality? I just don't see it. So it's
the biggest investment, probably an individual. You know, people like to think it's their pension, but most people see their home as their pension in a lot of cases, don't they, these days? So it's probably one of the most important topics to an individual in their lives. So something has to be done.
Absolutely, and something that you don't do very often. So and when you hear the stories now of people going in, you know, people should feel more confident about being able to move home more often. And I think the reality is in our jurisdiction, they don't want to do it, and they go in and do it and think, I'm not doing that again because it was horrendous. You know, you end up with this situation where the housing stock is not in the right place with the right people. You know, people are in properties that aren't what they would ideally have, you know, and they're then going into, well, we'll just extend instead, or we'll just make do or whatever, because we don't want to be in that process. And that the economic benefit of people being able to move more easily to properties that are more associated to what they need, it's massive. You know, everybody benefits from that perspective.
And funnily enough, that was, I mean, I remember we first met, because I think we were on a panel, weren't we, at a Smart Data conference. It was Liz Brandt's control shift thing, which was fantastic. But I think you were trying to explain that at the time. You know, there's a huge economic benefit, like most of these things, by wheeling out the wheat from the chaff. You know, all those horrible niggly problems and the flow of information and all that stuff. You're probably uniquely able to compare, and I'd be really interested to compare and contrast, you know, with your recent visit to Australia. Are there any call-outs that you can see in terms of differences in the UK? Is it quite similar, or and I guess that's the first bit. And second one, you know, given it's so much further ahead actually in that context than the UK, you know, what can you see coming that's perhaps wasn't anticipated when you embarked out in Australia? You know, any thoughts about today and tomorrow, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is the personalities involved in property transactions are incredibly similar. It definitely appeals to the same sort of personality. You know, those people that are very risk averse, that they want to provide a really good service, that they're concerned about their consumer clients. All of those things are very real here and there. I think the thing that the whole prospect to them of this inability to be able to provide your client with a level of certainty blew them away. They just could not get that. I mean, people in Australia, and I've spoken to many, they'll nip over, because of course we have a lot of expats anyway. They'll nip over to Australia to buy a property and be home for 4 weeks and know it's going to happen. Now,
that's so unknown, isn't it?
Can you imagine? Nobody in our where we are. you wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't even plan a holiday. You wouldn't go anywhere. You wouldn't do anything.
Flights for that, would
no,
you? Yeah, you would,
not at all. And because they just know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And again, they just know it's going to get registered at Land Registry. No one even, when you sort of say, oh, well, we have a 20% requisition rate for everything that goes into Land Registry here, they just say, what? It's less than 1% there.
So that would be a good one to explain, because the title piece of this is so important. When you talk about requisition rates here, can you just touch on that a bit further?
Yeah. So what happens here at the moment is no validation is done of the title other than the physical eyes on from a conveyancer or whatever. Nothing is validated with Land Registry until after you've moved the money, completed, and you've either, you've got your new mortgage if it's a refinance, or you've moved house if it's a house purchase. And at that point, the information goes to Land Registry. And at that point, they then start going, hang on, there's an issue here. The names aren't correct, or there's an address discrepancy, or you haven't got a document that we need. That's when everybody's moved. Exactly. And whereas in this world, all of that is validated because you're validating it up front. You can't move forward until that happens. So that a lot of those things, not everything, because like anything, there's always going to be anomalies. There's always going to be more complex transactions. But for your general transactions, all of a sudden you've got that certainty and validation that you've done all the work, it's fine, and Land Registry are going to accept it.
And the bit for me that I find almost bizarre there is that people don't probably understand, and when I say people, I mean not just someone buying a property, but someone securing debt on a property that risks persist post completion. So you think the lenders should be throwing themselves at this, I guess. In terms of trying to solve it. Yeah,
well, most lenders will have a full team of people who are there to chase exactly that, because at the end of the day, lending is all about the security you're going to have at the end, isn't it? It's all very nice to lend the money, but ultimately you need the security for which you've lent the money, and
of course the person is buying. That's
exactly,
again, biggest investment in your life, etc.
Exactly. And people can come to sell their property or refinance their property and find that they haven't been registered. That can happen and does happen today. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen. And from a lender's perspective, as soon as they've issued the money, and again, they issue the money today and they send it to a law firm account, and the law firm are there then to facilitate the completion, but there's no visibility for the lender. So the only time that they know that has happened is when they get informed by Land Registry that there is an application with them and that it's been completed. But that time scale, there's complete lack of visibility during that time. It's complete exposure. Yeah.
I mean, I guess for us, this is not about us, but in terms of, it'd be wrong of me not to interject and throw something there. I mean, for securing comms between customers and consumers, intermediaries, that's our sort of bread and butter, really. So a tiny little nugget amongst a much bigger problem, really, which is interesting. So I mean, and what's your expectation around the pace of the UK? Because as I say, that's always a challenge, isn't it? Embedded systems are hard to change.
Yeah, well, we've recently just announced our partnership with NatWest, which Fantastic. Is great to have such a prominent lender on board from that perspective. So like anything, there is always this sort of reticence and concern, particularly when you're dealing with money. Of who's going to go first and who's going to come later. And again, we are very live to that challenge, and the fact that we want to, the launch events that we're doing in September are all around how can we get conveyancers onboarded and transacting on the platform at a reasonably low level, so that they can get used to that, so that as lenders get on and they start transacting, it becomes normal process and people are comfortable with it. But it is a matter of bringing everyone along
on the journey.
Yeah, and on the back of showing that value all the time and trying to come back to, look, this is today, this is not okay. So let's look at what tomorrow could look like. In with a lot of the other wider projects that are going on in the property market as well. As you know, I mean, there's a lot of things going on about how can we improve the upfront information, the material information that you get at the beginning of the transaction. How can we improve the digitization experience across? How can we make that digital? How can we bring in trust frameworks that people are going to be able to move information much more effectively and efficiently? And then on top of that, how can we move the money more effectively? How can we deal with the register of the title more effectively? So it all starts to come together, and the work that Beyond Encryption are doing as well has such an important part within that, with that gel of, how you're going to communicate in the most secure way as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I see how all those parts come together, really.
And I'm fascinated to see, if you guys, I mean, I can't imagine anybody listening to this, isn't thinking, oh my God, I hope this can move at pace. So I really hope that PEXA and you and your team are able to help make that happen. And we could carry on talking about this, and what we should do is revisit this at some point to update people, because as I say, I felt a real ignoramus when I hadn't appreciated what had already happened in another really not a close geography, but one. Australia always feels like one of those places that it should be physically closer because we share such similar.
We have so many cultures. Synergies, don't we? Yeah, absolutely. But believe me, after that flight, it's a long way away.
So listen, thank you so much. My last question, and I should have warned you this, but in a way, it's quite nice not to. Is I always like to ask people that come onto this, clever people in the industry, if you could give your younger self a bit of advice, maybe not one, but a short snippet, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Okay. I think just have more faith in yourself and in what can actually be achieved, because and get rid of that imposter syndrome very early on, because that was a big challenge for me. But it's enjoy it, I think. Enjoy it. Honestly, the last 30 years in the property industry have literally gone like that for me, and I was always looking for the next thing and what's going to be the next thing and what should we do. But actually, when I look at it now, it's like, just take in every moment, just enjoy it, and look at what you can then bring to it. Sure. I love that. Yeah,
perfect. That's really, really great. Listen, thank you so much for being patient with us as well on the way into this. But Angela, thanks for joining us, and look forward to hearing more about the journey and hopefully PEXA's successes as you move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.